It's over. Oh, it is beyond over for Anthony Edwards in Minnesota. And you know what? I don't even think Anthony Edwards knows it yet. But I'm going to tell everyone why it is time for Anthony Edwards to request a trade from Minnesota and come to the Atlanta Hawks. Yes, I am going there today. But before I get started on that, I want to tell you guys to hit that subscribe button, like, comment, and share. And tell a friend, tell a family member, tell whoever to support my channel. It is time for me to go to the direction I am going to go on this episode. And I am here to tell y'all that it is over for Anthony Edwards in Minnesota. And what I mean by that is that Anthony Edwards and the Minnesota Timberwolves will not win an NBA championship together. It is not going to happen. It is over for the Minnesota Timberwolves. It's over. It is not going to happen for the Minnesota Timberwolves in the Western Conference as far as them winning a championship. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It is over. Y'all saw that game with the San Antonio Spurs and the beat down that they put on the Minnesota Timberwolves in Game 6, 139-109, beating them by 30 points. And not only was that game, it was 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter. And we saw Anthony Edwards going all the way to the San Antonio Spurs bench and just shaking everyone's hands and good game, congratulating the Spurs. Like he knew it was over. Anthony Edwards knew it was over when the Minnesota Timberwolves were down 28 points at home with 8 minutes left in the game. When it was 128-95. Actually, was it? Excuse my math. 33 points. My bad. My apologies. It was 33 points when they were down at home in the fourth quarter. And Anthony Edwards knew it was over. But the reality is this, man. The Minnesota Timberwolves are running out of options to improve their roster. They don't have a lot of draft picks. They don't have a lot of trade assets. And the reality for the Minnesota Timberwolves is that you look at the Western Conference, you look at the two teams that Minnesota will be competing with for the foreseeable future as constructed, the San Antonio Spurs and the Oklahoma City Thunder. They're just beginning. They're just getting started when it comes to their run in the Western Conference, because the way that those two teams are set up when it comes to their young talent and the depth and the athleticism and most importantly the amount of trade and draft assets that they have at their disposal, the San Antonio Spurs and the Oklahoma City Thunder are just getting started. They're here to stay in the Western Conference. And when you look at the other teams that the Minnesota Timberwolves have to deal with, you're talking about teams like the Portland Trail Blazers. You know, they're young, they're talented, and they got a lot of assets to improve their team. You got the Lakers with Luka. JJ Redick is an elite coach, and they got some assets that they got, and they'll be able to improve their team. The Houston Rockets got young assets that they'll be able to draft picks. And then that's not even to mention teams like the Utah Jazz, who finished second in the draft lottery, and they got some young talent like Keontae George and Ace Bailey and Lauri Markkanen and Jaren Jackson Jr. and Walker Kessler, and they're gonna have the number 2 pick in the draft. In all likelihood, that pick is gonna be used either on AJ DeBanza or Darren Peterson. And so that's a young upstart and up and coming team that's on the rise. And you got the Memphis Grizzlies. They're picking third in the draft. You know, they're gonna add a young talent, maybe a Cam Boozer, to what they have. With Zach Edey and Cedric Coward. And so, like, it's just a bunch of these young upstart team. Dallas with Cooper Flagg. Like, they have the 9th pick in the draft, and they got Cooper Flagg. They're gonna be better, and they're gonna be on the rise. And you look at the Minnesota Timberwolves; they're just old and stuck. with no assets, no trade assets, no draft picks, and their key players. You look at Rudy Gobert. He's 32 years old. Julius, I think actually maybe 33 years old. My bad. So you got Rudy Gobert, who's 33 years old. Julius Randle is 31, 32. Mike Conley's 38, 39. I mean, who's the young upstart talent on their team? Jaden McDaniels. And so you look at where Minnesota is, they're stuck. And so they're stuck, and you saw the results of the Western Conference. When they played the San Antonio Spurs, it wasn't even close for most of that series. And the problem for the Minnesota Timberwolves and for Anthony Edwards is there's just nowhere to go, man. They're stuck. Teams around them in the Western Conference are just young, or if they're not young, they have a lot of picks and assets to improve their team. And you look at the Minnesota Timberwolves, they're just I know there's been this talk about them getting Giannis, being in the Giannis sweepstakes, but can they outbid the teams that are going to need to outbid to get Giannis? I don't think so. And even if they do end up getting Giannis, guess what? They're going to have to move a Jaden McDaniels, maybe a Rudy Gobert, two of your key players to get Giannis. And as a result, yeah, Giannis and Anthony Edwards sounds fantastic, but guess what? If you pull that off, you're going to create another hole in your roster, which means what you have won't be enough to compete at the level that you need to compete with when you're talking about competing with the San Antonio Spurs and the Oklahoma City Thunder and possibly other teams. And so it's a tough pill to swallow for the Minnesota Timberwolves, and if they don't get Giannis, you're talking about them taking a buy low swing on Ja Morant, who's injured, broken down, has a whole set of issues. Or maybe you're trying to take a swing at Joel Embiid, who, look, man, Joel Embiid's talented when he's healthy, but every year he's hurt. He's injured. He's breaking down. Whatever happens with his body, it breaks down every year. And he makes a lot of money, and he's expensive. And so you're talking about the Minnesota Timberwolves making buy low gambles if they don't get Giannis. And so it's just they're stuck. They're in a not so great place. And unfortunately for Minnesota and their fans, I think they've done some things pretty well when it comes to how they've been building their team. I thought the Rudy Gobert trade at the time was a good trade. I thought, they drafted Jaden McDaniels and he turned out to be a hit. But unfortunately with the new CBA coming in and these new second aprons and teams are trying to avoid these aprons, they end up trading Cat because you're up against the second apron. You can't keep everyone together. And so you trade Cat and you get Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo. And it's just, and Julius Randle, as we've seen with Julius Randle, last season, he was really good in the playoffs. You fast forward to this season, and he's awful. Just terrible. Postseason, averaging, not even shooting, he's shooting 35% from the field in the playoffs. It's just, and he's averaging, 15 a game. It's terrible. You can't rely on him when it matters. Julius Randle. And so it's a tough situation for Minnesota. You add in the fact that they traded 2 years ago. They traded an unprotected pick to get Rob Dillingham. That didn't work out. That ended up being a whiff. And he ended up trading Rob Dillingham for Ayu Dosunmu, who's good, productive, but it's not getting you to the next level. And so the Minnesota Timberwolves are just in an unfortunate situation with their team where they just have a roster that's, on the surface, they're good. They win. They last 4 years. They won in the neighborhood between 46 to 50 games. This past season they won 49 games. The last season they won 49 games, and then the season before that they won 56 games. And then I think in 2022 or 2023 they won, was it 42 games, and then they won 46. And so like I said, man, for the past 5 years, they on average they won around in the neighborhood of 46 to 50 games. And so they're good. The Minnesota Timberwolves have proven to be a good team, for the past half decade. But at the end of the day, man, good ain't good enough with them. And you look at the teams that they're dealing with in the Western Conference, they're young and on the upswing. They're trending up. They got star power. When you talk about Oklahoma City and San Antonio, they have star power. They have depth. They have athleticism. And they all have draft picks and trade assets to improve their team if they need to. That's not the case in Minnesota, which, again, as a result that I'm going to get into, Anthony Edwards, to me, is time. To me, he doesn't. And the thing with Anthony Edwards is he doesn't know it yet. He don't know it yet. Anthony Edwards believes. I'm sure he believes right now that, you know what? If I was a little bit more healthier, if I didn't have banged up knees, and that maybe if Julius Randle was healthy or whatever the case is, Anthony Edwards is going to probably say, you know what? If I were healthy, we could have won the championship. Because you look, as a competitor, you feel that way about yourself. But I'm here to tell Anthony Edwards, your team's not good enough. The Minnesota Timberwolves are not good enough. And I'm just here to tell you, Anthony Edwards, my favorite player in the league, I think you should ask for a trade. And not only do I think you should ask for a trade, Anthony Edwards, but I believe Anthony Edwards should ask out of Minnesota, and he should ask to go to the Atlanta Hawks. And that's right, I'm said it. Anthony Edwards, I'm here to tell you, you need to come home. You need to come home, and you need to come play for the Atlanta Hawks, because the Atlanta Hawks, Anthony Edwards, is your golden ticket. The Atlanta Hawks, Anthony Edwards, is your pathway to actually get into an NBA Finals, because it's not going to happen in Minnesota. No. It's not going to happen in Minnesota. That ship is sailed when you look at their situation. But you come here to the Atlanta Hawks, and baby, your life will change. You come to the Atlanta Hawks. You come to the Eastern Conference, the weaker conference, where the only thing that's missing from the Atlanta Hawks is they need a primary scoring option. They need a go-to guy, a go-to scorer. Anthony Edwards, you have you can fill that void for these Atlanta Hawks. And in between you and Jalen Johnson, we can go places. The Atlanta Hawks can go places with Anthony Edwards and Jalen Johnson together. I'm telling you, Anthony Edwards, put in that trade request. Do it. And tell the ownership, you know what? I want to go to the Atlanta Hawks. And you know what? With Anthony Edwards, believe it or not, I actually believe the Hawks have been on Anthony Edwards' radar just based off the fact that at the All-Star break, at All-Star weekend, he was chatting it up with Jalen Johnson. Y'all remember that? Y'all remember the convo after the All-Star game when Anthony Edwards was chatting up with Jalen Johnson? And he was like, man, I can't wait to come home. Y'all got some nice wings. And he ain't talking about the lemon pepper wings at Magic City. He talking about Jalen Johnson, Dyson Daniels, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Jonathan Kuminga. He talking about them wings. And Anthony Edwards, he sees the vision. But I tell you what, Anthony Edwards, you the missing piece. Come on back home to Atlanta. Well, come on back home, man. We'll welcome you with open arms. We'll bring you back. We'll welcome you. Because Anthony Edwards, he needs a change of scenery, man. It's not gonna happen for him in Minnesota. It ain't gonna happen for him in Minnesota. It's not gonna happen for him. He needs to ask out. He needs to come back home. He needs to come back home to the ATL, to Atlanta, Georgia. And look, and in reality, do I think Anthony Edwards is going to actually go through with a trade request this summer? No, he won't. He won't. Because I think Anthony Edwards is loyal, and he's loyal enough, and Minnesota's had some success winning games and going to the playoffs, that I think Anthony Edwards is not, I don't think he's reached his breaking point as of yet. And I think he's going to give the Minnesota front office a year or two, if that, probably a couple of years. He's going to probably give them a couple of years for Minnesota to kind of, get their act in order and try to upgrade the roster. But as an observer, I just think it's going to be very difficult for the Minnesota Timberwolves to get to the level that they need to get done, man, because the Western Conference is a beast. It's going to get better moving forward. Like I said, the San Antonio Spurs and the Oklahoma City Thunder are right there. They ain't going away. Young, talented, star power, athleticism, assets to improve. Those teams the San Antonio Spurs and the Oklahoma City Thunder are going to be here for a long time. Long time. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. So those teams are not going away. The Utah Jazz, I believe, are ascending, especially with them getting the top 2 pick and the young talent they have. The Houston Rockets, and to me, like, the Houston Rockets are gonna get better. They got their young team. They got some young assets. And look, you could make a case that the Minnesota Timberwolves are better than most of these teams in the Western Conference, not named Oklahoma City and San Antonio. But the reality is, man, like, those two teams are they're the cream of the cream. They're the cream of the top. And for where Minnesota is, man, it's just going to be harder for them to improve their team. And you got teams behind them that are just young and up and coming. Portland's young and up and coming. Utah's young and up and coming. Houston, they got their own set of issues. But Houston has at least have some young talent and some assets to make some moves to improve their team if they want to go in that direction. The Dallas Mavericks got Cooper Flagg. The Lakers got Luka and Austin Reeves, and they got cap space, and they got enough assets to where I think they're gonna make some moves around the edges to improve their team, right? And so I'm looking at some of these teams, man, and I'm just saying, man, Lakers, Houston, Denver. I think Denver's is kind of in a similar predicament as Minnesota. They're another team, just not a lot of assets, to improve their roster. They're kind of stuck in. Look, man, I'll be honest. It wouldn't. I've been talking about Anthony Edwards, but it wouldn't surprise me if we start hitting some Jokic trade stuff. I don't think we're that far off from that. Like, Minnesota and Denver are in some tough spots. Superstar talents on teams with not good enough rosters. And not a lot of assets that you have to improve their team, to improve their situation. And you have teams around them in the Western Conference that are just young and up and coming. I mean, it's tough in the West, man. It's tough. And I'm looking at Anthony Edwards specifically, and I'm just like, man, how much more is he going to be able to take over the next 1, 2, 3 years? It's tough, because you look at the Minnesota Timberwolves, their best players are in their 30s, and to improve make the improvements that they're gonna have to make, you're probably gonna have to move a starter or two, a Jaden McDaniels. He's the guy that has the best trade value, and guess what? You move him, you have a void at your wings, as not having enough wing defenders. And your defense gets worse. And so, like I said, man, it's kind of a give and take situation with the Minnesota Timberwolves. You go after Giannis, all of a sudden you get Giannis, and you have good perimeter defenders. It's tough. Minnesota's in a tough situation, and I'm just looking at Ant-Man. I'm just looking at this situation. I think time's ticking. I think the clock is ticking for Ant-Man. And to me, if I'm Ant-Man, I'm being real about it, man. You want to win a championship? It's not going to happen in Minnesota. I doubt it. I think you should ask out And to me, if I'm Anthony Edwards, I'm the number one team I got on my radar is the Atlanta Hawks. Come on back home, man. You come to the Atlanta Hawks. You play in the Eastern Conference, and you got a chance to get to the finals because you look at the Eastern Conference, and I know the Knicks are doing their thing, but I'm here to tell y'all the Knicks, man, they're doing their thing and give them credit. They're hot right now, but long term, I don't think people look at the Knicks as like a juggernaut that's gonna be a fixture in the Eastern Conference for multiple years. They're a good team, give them credit, but they ain't OKC or San Antonio. Nuh-uh. Boston, they got some question marks. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, they lost in the first round to the Sixers. And so they got their question marks. Cleveland, we all know they got their question marks. They might lose to the Pistons. And speaking of the Pistons, I love me some Cade Cunningham, but they got some work to do to build a roster around them. So my point being, you look at the Eastern Conference, it's wide open. And if you're Anthony Edwards, you come home to the Atlanta Hawks, you're the missing piece. You get this team over the top, come back home, and you get the Hawks to the finals. And you'll be a made legend in this city, Anthony Edwards. You'll be a made man. Just think about it. That's all. I'm just saying. And so I'm just saying, man, if you Anthony Edwards, hey, man, Atlanta, Georgia's got you, man. We Atlanta Hawks, ATL. I'm just saying. You can come back home, Anthony Edwards. Come back home, man. You ain't winning. You ain't gonna be winning a championship in Minnesota. Ain't not with San Antonio and OKC in the way. It ain't gonna happen. Might as well need to put in that trade request. Come back home to the ATL, man. I'm just saying. But yeah, man. Like I said, man. To me, I look at the Minnesota Timberwolves and I look at Anthony Edwards, and I think the Minnesota's in a tough spot with Ant-Man and their team in general. Like I think they have a long road ahead of them to improve this roster to the level that I think they're gonna need to improve their roster at. When you consider where OKC and San Antonio are in the Western Conference, man, those teams aren't going away, man. San Antonio Spurs are a juggernaut. They are a machine with Victor Wembanyama, Stephon Castle, Dylan Harper, De'Aaron Fox, Keldon Johnson, Devin Vassell. I mean, the Minnesota Julian Champagnie, can't forget about him, the shooter. The San Antonio Spurs, man, like they are a monster, and they're not going away anytime soon. And OKC, they're the defending world champions, and they still got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Chet Holmgren, and Aja Mitchell's been breaking out. And I know Jalen Williams has been out, but he's gonna be back, and he's still a very good player. And so, look, man, those two monsters in the Western Conference, scary. And you look at where that Minnesota Timberwolves is, man. They got a long way to go, man. They got some decisions to make, man. Do you trade? Who's gonna want Julius Randle after his postseason performance? Do you keep him? You might be stuck with them. What? Rudy Gobert. Do you trade Rudy Gobert? Rudy Gobert, for all of his offensive flaws, he's an elite defensive center. And so you lose him, you might get worse. I know they got the young kid, Johan Berenger, I think that's his name, the guy they drafted last year, but is he ready? You trade Rudy Gobert, that's some big shoes to fill. And so you got Jaden McDaniels, to me, your best wing defender. It's a lot of decisions on that's what you do with Minnesota, man. How you going to upgrade the team? Because chances are, in all likelihood, in order for them to upgrade the team, you're probably gonna have to end up moving one of Julius Randle, Rudy Gobert, or Jaden McDaniels. Like, you probably gonna end up moving two of the three, and that's gonna be, look, man. it's gonna be tough. You lose, you trade Jordan. Like I'm sure Minnesota Timberwolves fans want them to get rid of Rudy Gobert. Not Rudy Gobert, but get rid of Julius Randle, and I get it. But you end up moving Jaden McDaniels. That's a big void. You add another void. You add some talent, but you create another void. So that's something that I think Minnesota's gonna have to be looking at doing, man. But Minnesota, they got their hands full, and as an observer, I am skeptical that it's going to end well for them. And for Anthony Edwards, as I've been saying, you need to me, I'm telling you, Anthony Edwards, just an advice to you. Put in that trade request. Put in that trade request and request that trade. And come on back home to the Atlanta Hawks. Come on, Ant-Man. Come back home to the Hawks. We need you. And I think you need us. We got you, Ant-Man. We can make things happen. Just think about it. And like I said, man, Ant-Man, come home. Come back home to the Atlanta Hawks. Come home.